Our virtual platform has now made it possible for us to invite guest speakers who may otherwise have been inaccessible, and out of our reach. One such person is Professor Niveen Abu-Rmeileh, who I'll be introducing in a short while. Our audience also has become very large, and we are now able to bring this forum to a much wider spectrum of people. Our last webinar was on the various pedagogical approaches into bioethics with Dr. Dominique Martin from Australia leading that session. And today we have moved to Palestine and the challenges to conduct research in lands under occupation. So our guest speaker today will be sharing her personal experiences as a scholar and a researcher living and working under occupation in Palestine. Dr. Niveen Abu-Rmeileh is a full professor of epidemiology and public health at Birzeit University in the West Bank, Palestine. She obtained her doctoral degree from the University of Glasgow. Dr. Abu-Rmeileh has been a national lead and regional as well as an international lead in research. She's a board member of the Global Implementation Society and is also a member of the Eastern Mediterranean Advisory Committee for Health Research and also WHO Eastern Mediterranean Research Ethics Review Committee. Niveen's research interests are focused on three broad areas: non-communicable diseases, which includes for her diabetes, cancer, and tobacco smoking, and then reproductive health and information systems for health. Niveen is currently building a research team in reproductive health, mainly focusing on implementation research and systematic review approaches. Her current research includes understanding existing digital reproductive health initiatives and policies, strengthening adolescent health information systems, and evaluation of WHO tools developed to assess respectful care during childbirth. Niveen will be sharing her experience with us today in pursuit of her research goals and conducting scholarly research while working in trying circumstances, as we will realize in the next few minutes. So, ladies and gentlemen, as always, I would like to encourage participation by all attendees for this forum. You can write down your questions as and when they arise in your mind in the chat function in the Zoom feature if you're on Zoom right now with us, or in the comment section of Facebook Live if you joined us on Facebook Live. And just jot them down as they arise as Dr. Abu-Rmeileh speaks. We will be compiling them as we go along, and my associate, Ms. Swaleha Shekhani, will be putting them to the speaker during the break in the middle of her talk and then at the end of the talk. If time permits, we may even be able to invite you to ask your questions directly using your video and audio. But at this point, however, I would like the participants to keep your microphones on mute, make sure that they're on mute. But please feel free to have your cameras on so that we can have some reality in our virtual world. Dr. Rmeileh, thank you for making time for CBEC to share your experiences in doing research in very extraordinary circumstances. Over to you, Niveen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amer, for this invitation. I'm very pleased to use this virtual platform to see colleagues. Actually, I can see names of colleagues and friends, so I'm very pleased to do this and share my experience. Before starting my presentation, I would like to say, since you asked about my experience, my presentation will sound like a narrative rather than a very structured presentation. So bear with me, it will be a little bit scientific, but it will have all correct information. So let me first share my PowerPoint presentation, and I will give you the floor to ask questions once I finish telling my story in certain parts. So let's start. And I think the title we have proposed for this presentation will reflect some way the content of what I'm going to talk about. Abnormal conditions. I come from Palestine. which everybody knew about, but I will give you some background about where I come from. First, let's agree on the name of the country or the place I come from. Is it Palestine, or is it occupied Palestinian territory, or is it Palestinian Authority, or what we are talking about? And let me give you some history. And before I give you some history, because I believe that history is his story. So what I want to do is tell you my story about my country. So let's agree that this is my story about my country. I'm not sure which version of Palestine you know. So I'm going to use first Palestine and then we'll specify my terminology. During the British Mandate, or we don't have a map in this summarizing figure, I don't have a map that describes the British Mandate one, which used to called Sham area. But during the British Mandate, the first part called Palestine here, and then something called Transjordan. The whole thing used to be called Palestine. With time, people were sitting around a table somewhere in the north, and they were just with their pens and pencils drawing roads and lines, etc. So they agreed to call this area Palestine and this area to be called Transjordan. During this period, Jewish migration started to come to Palestine. We did have Jewish people living in Palestine a long time ago, but the intensive migration started earlier. Then when two people start to compete and fight on the same land, the UN decided to come in and they proposed a plan, a partition plan in 47. And with the partition plan, it seems that they were cutting the land equally between the two nations. The Arab people and the Jewish people didn't agree, or we don't know who's telling the right story, but people didn't like the plan. So in 48, the Jewish people decided to take over and take the whole thing. But they didn't take the whole thing. They took what is called now Israel and announced Israel in 48. So in 48, the green area became Israel, and these orange areas, we don't know what they are called. Fighting over, the Arabs decided to protect the Palestinian lands, fights. Then Israel took some lands from Egypt, some land from Syria, and kept the land in the West Bank and Gaza. Fighting, negotiating. In 93, people decided that we should have a peace process. We will give Palestinians some land, and this is what we will give you. We will give you this piece, the West Bank and East and Gaza. This is the story. So this is what people agreed. This is what the Palestinian Authority, or the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, agreed with the peace people maker to give us. Okay. This is my history, just to recall. So I will stop share here and give you an idea about what's happening in reality. Let's go back and see the size of the land that was given by Oslo to Palestinians. And I will share with you now what do we have. I hope you can see this interactive map. So this is Palestine. This is very, very small land. Just remember, it's very, very small land. So this is the West Bank. Let me start with Gaza. It's easier to describe. As Gaza is completely separated from the West Bank, so no connection between Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, no physical connection. Gaza is completely surrounded by Israel from all sides and Egypt from this side. So the only exit for Gazan people to leave is either to go through Israel to the West Bank and exit to Jordan, or to go through Rafah through Egypt. Easy peasy Gaza. Now, just to simplify the West Bank, in theory, it looks as one block, whole land for all Palestinians. In reality, what we have is this. Let me take one part, let's say this one, north of the West Bank. The dark area is where Palestinians live. And this is called Area A. This is what the Palestinian took after Oslo Agreement. Then the lighter color, this one, this is Area B, which is in theory for Palestinians, but still under Israeli administration. And the whole thing around it is Area C, which is until now under Israeli control, and it's completely under Israeli things. Now, if you look at the blue areas, these are the settlements. So in theory, Palestinians should live on one side, Israelis should live on other side, but these are Palestinian areas. And this is the issue of settlements. So you have all these settlements implanted between Palestinian areas. And in order to protect these settlements, we have checkpoints and more checkpoints and more checkpoints. So if you look at it, Palestinians have to cross checkpoints to move between one Palestinian village to another Palestinian village, or one Palestinian city to one Palestinian village. And just to have a more clear idea, see how many checkpoints? It's very easy. It looks nice. It looks completely Palestinian. In reality, it's not. So if we're talking about having an independent Palestinian state with what we have, I don't know. Okay. Let me zoom. I will move in the slides on Jerusalem, but let me show you Jerusalem here. You've heard about Sheikh Jarrah area, certain areas within Jerusalem. Here is Jerusalem. In theory, this is Jerusalem. So if you look at the dark areas, this is where Arabs live, here, here, and here. Let's look at the blue color, here, and here, and here. So within Jerusalem, Arab neighborhood and Israeli neighborhood, Arab neighborhood and Israeli neighborhood. And this is, in theory, East Jerusalem. This is West Jerusalem. It's completely Israeli, but East Jerusalem is Israelis and Palestinians. In theory, it should be Palestinian. In theory, this is under occupation and should be given to Palestinians. Okay. So just to show you, this is the simplification of what we have for the West Bank. How does this affect the daily life of Palestinians? I will show you. We have a separation wall. This wall ranges between 4 meters to 8 meters in certain areas. This wall is separating Palestinian villages from each other, but also it's separating Palestinian areas from Israeli areas. Some places there are gates that is open in certain time and close on certain time. And this affects how people go to their work or students go to their schools. Well, this is this one just showing a separation between, but main checkpoints like Qalandia checkpoints, which is the famous checkpoint that separates the north of East Jerusalem from the south of West Bank. This is how people cross the checkpoint, very civilized. This is if we drive, usually I drive this way on this road every day. This is our life. We queue on this for the distance between my house and my university is 20 kilometers. It takes 2 hours just to have an idea about the traffic. It's not normal traffic. And if we are blessed and we have, for example, Ramadan, they will not allow people to go through this. They will open for them the whole checkpoint, and this is how we queue to go to Jerusalem. East Jerusalem, we are blessed and cursed. We are blessed because we have all different religion places. We have the Islamic one, the Christian one, and Jewish one, but were cursed because everybody wanted to have this land. So I don't know, you should come and visit. It's a very beautiful place. East Jerusalem is very specific and unique. I will come, when I discuss the different research challenges, I will give more details about it. But just keep in mind how it is divided, how they are separating the different villages of East Jerusalem from the main city. So it's completely fragmented. Movement within, it's very difficult. We have an issue of identity, and I will explain this later. We have social isolation because the type of identity for the Palestinians living in East Jerusalem is different from the identity for Palestinians living in the West Bank or Gaza. We have discrimination in services. We face discrimination in services. We are third or fourth citizen grade. We have problem with housing. If you notice how the land is restricted, there's no way for expansion in any way. So people are forced to move either to the West Bank or to be completely integrated within Israeli society. And we face the issue of taxation. Just to summarize the whole story or my story, we have several types of Palestinian, several labels given to Palestinians. So we have Palestinians living in the West Bank, and these Palestinians, they have Palestinian ID. We have Palestinian living in Gaza Strip, they have Palestinian ID. We have Palestinian living in East Jerusalem. They have Israeli residents, but they don't have any nationality. So they're just citizens there, but we don't have nationality. Palestinians who came back from diaspora after Oslo Agreement, and some of them, they managed to get Palestinian ID, but some of them, they're still waiting for the reunion agreement, they're waiting for Israel to give them an ID. So they're living with no ID. And we have Palestinian who lives in refugee camps in Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. And these ones, they have refugee IDs. So they are Palestinian, but they have refugee IDs. And finally, we have the Palestinian who managed to integrate in different parts of the world, and they have the different parts of the world ID. So I will stop here and finish my story about the background and where I come from, and setting the context to discuss the different issues related to my research. So if anyone have any question, I'm happy to stop here and answer your questions, and then I continue my presentation.
So before Swaleha asks some of the questions that have come in the chat box, I just wanted to ask, so the movement restriction affects, as you said, school children going to school, it affects people going to work, doing research, etc. Because much of your research also and others requires field work and requires free movement. So these restrictions actually inhibit also the work that you do as a researcher. That is obvious. But do these restrictions also affect healthcare and access to facilities of that nature?
Yes, and I'm going to highlight this in my coming slides, but it depends on which area we're talking about. Certain areas, these gates are there and open, so people are free to move, but whenever there is any security reason, or I'm not sure if it is a real security reason, this will be closed, and so people will not be able to move at all. In certain areas, there are gates that are open in certain times and close at a certain time. And for these ones, people, they got to know the timing and they arrange their life according to this one. And for us, for our field work, for our seeking services, we have to plan this according to the time of that one. In certain places, this is when, this is mostly related to people separated from their lands. So the wall comes surrounding the village and taking the land. So if people want to go to their land, they need to have special permit from the Israeli side to go to their land, for example, to harvest their olives or whatever. So it depends on the situation, and each area have their own situation. For example, in the valley areas, they need to have special permit. In certain areas in the north, they open the gates in on a certain time. So I think this is this is very specific to Israeli new instruction, but also to that area. If I may respond to Elizabeth, my dear friend, question, she's asking about do school children need identification to go to schools? Just to tell you, my dear, we live with our ID. So students, if they, especially adolescents who reach their puberty, so they are mature, they look big, but they are still young, so they are 14 or 16. They carry their birth certificate with them, just to cross the border, just to show this is my birth certificate and this is me. We don't move without our ID. If we want to go to the market to buy milk, we will take our ID with us. This is not because you are at any point, someone will stop you and ask about your ID. So you should carry your ID with you all the time. And I was surprised, and this is a first personal, I'm giving some flavor. When I first traveled to the UK to do my PhD, I have to it was in Scotland, and I needed to go to do a course in London. So I was carrying my passport, I was carrying my student ID, I was carrying everything that proved that I am Niveen. And when I traveled at the airport, I just showed my student travel. And this was before September 11, sorry. So I was carrying, and he said, I said, student, I showed my student card. I was like, do you need my passport? He said, no, that's fine. And I was like, I have my passport. I was waiting for the way of checking the ID rather than just moving around. Taking the bus from Switzerland to France and just showed your ID. For me, it was like culture shock, just to have an idea about how we move. It's very difficult. We have to move with our ID, just to answer the question.
We have two more questions, and one of them is from Dr. Iftikhar Khan,
Yeah.
who's asking, are there lessons for Palestinians from the US exit from Afghanistan? I'm sorry.
I'm not sure if I can link the two questions together. So if you're saying Palestinians from the US exit from Afghanistan, so how can I link this? I didn't understand the question. If you can.
Yeah, so are there lessons for Palestinians from the US exit from Afghanistan? So I'm not sure exactly what he's asking either, but Dr. Iftikhar maybe could elaborate.
If you can speak.
Yeah, I mean, if you could elaborate on that. Dr. Iftikhar, yeah. Need to be united.
Okay, perhaps we can come back to Dr. Iftikhar a little later. We'll put him on screen. I think there's a question from Professor Farad Moazzam also.
I can see the question, any restriction from Israeli on Palestinian. All what I have described is restriction. So restriction, I'm going to move to this one. Restriction of movement is the main restriction. It's killing our time. It's taking most of our life. I'm spending my life on the roads, just to simplify the answer.
If I may, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Niveen. This is Dr. Moazzam. It's good to have you here. And I just have a comment, and
Yes.
which is that I'm delighted that in all our seminars, generally anywhere, it's really numbers and statistics when we talk about research. So what I'm delighted about is that before you get to the research, you have placed us within the context of how and the difficulties that you face. So narratives, as you said, I think you don't have to be apologetic about it. I think narratives and context actually accentuate what you're going to say about your research. So thank you very much. That was just a comment.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farhat. Okay, if I may move ahead now.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So let me introduce myself, and maybe this will explain why I apologize for starting with a narrative. because I graduated as a statistical epidemiologist from the University of Glasgow from Scotland. So I'm a number person, but this is the first time that I work, and I do believe in qualitative research, but this is my background. So given the situation I was living in, just to say that I managed to graduate from one of the top universities in the UK. In 2014, I met the editor of The Lancet, and he predicted a good future for me. And he was saying a rising star in the Middle East is rising. I didn't expect that, but he was saying, you have a promising future. In the last year, I was ranked as one of the top 2% researchers with a top prize citation, which is, I think, very rewarding for myself. I try to disseminate my work and work globally. So I'm a board member of the Global Implementation Research, which is a new approach that helps in making and ensuring a successful implementation of programs and intervention, rather looking at processes rather than looking at outcomes. I'm very proud to be a member of different international committees, but I'm very proud to be a member of regional committees when serving the region, because we do need to work with different experts in the region. So I'm serving at different committees, was ranked top in different researches. It wasn't an easy life, just to say, but I wanted to start with the positive perspective, showing that given all what we can face, we can be successful. And let me start with our research life. So what is similar to other settings? And this is how I tried to think, because when I was discussing with Dr. Amer how we can share our experience, let us think of what is similar and what is different. And personally, when I tried to identify the different challenges I have faced in my life, the first thing was being female. And I think lots of colleagues will agree with me. To be a female researcher is not as an easy thing. But this is not unique to our setting. So all females has to face this here and in different parts of the world. So I think this is a main challenge to become a good researcher, but this is similar to other settings. Starting a new career takes some time, because you need to identify team, you need to work with others, you need to work hard, you need to prove yourself. It is a challenge for me, but it is also similar to other parts of the world. Building team, building networks, identify good people to work with. So one hand does not clap. You need someone to work with so you can succeed. So building a good team also takes some time. But it is not unique for us. Other people can talk and tell lots of stories about this. Funding is an issue that everybody faces. Here, of course, in developing countries, we face this issue more, but this is common for other people. Research environment. I was thinking about, we face lots of environment. People don't read here. They don't encourage research. They don't take evidence-based, they make decisions based on whatever policymakers. So we have this, but I think this is common in other places. So what is different from other places? And for me I'm trying to be systematic, but at the same time telling narrative. So it's a combination of different things. Maybe I'm not successful in telling a story, but trying to be systematic in my presentation. So where are the main challenges that I faced in my life? The first one was in proposal writing and fundraising. The second main thing was team formulation, the data collection, and finally publication. And I will go specifically for each group. When it came to proposal writing and fundraising, there were several issues in this area. The first one was capacity building and language barrier. If you want to fundraise, you have to write in a very scientific language, English language, because it's a second language for us. But also we need to have a good capacity building for other people who are working with me to get a successful proposal. In our setting, I couldn't identify team because we have the brain drain. Everybody, given our context, and I think this is common for all developing countries, but for our context, if you get the chance to leave, to work in a more or a better environment, it's more challenging. So I have to build capacity of my team so I can have a team that I can work with and support me in this process. The second one is local funding. As I have explained, I work in the so-called Palestinian Authority under occupation. And the authority doesn't have many resources. And the money they have, it has to go to main things. So it will be go to security, health, etc., etc. Research is the least on the agenda of policymakers. We don't have local funding. And this was a main issue. Money will go to certain things, it wouldn't go to research. No local funding. This means that we have to compete for international funding. And this is very tricky. First, because we're not as developed as other countries, so we need to be as competitive to compete with other universities. But also we were facing specifically in Palestine, the so-called conditional funding. A conditional funding is a nice way to show that peaceful life is there. Politics is not affecting everything among Palestinian life. So you can see Palestinian academics working with Israeli academics, etc., etc. So to get this type of relationship, some funding were requesting collaboration with other universities, and the Israeli university would be one of these universities. And for us as national universities, and we're boycotting work with Israeli universities, this is a main challenge for us, especially if the funding is coming from big international donors who would say, it will be nice if you work together, it will be stronger research because you have similar environment, Palestinian people and Israeli people, you have similar environment, you have so blah, 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 so why don't you work together, etc. I'm not sure if this is successful or not, but this is not acceptable. As Palestinian academic, we cannot work with Israeli academic. It's a clear boycott thing. So it's a main fund, it's a main challenge. Lots of money is going there, but we're not using it. Some universities, they fall in that trap at the beginning. So you might notice some publication coming as a collaborative thing, but then people realize that we're falling in that trap, we're stopping. And I think the boycott movement is succeeding in this. So this was the main challenge. The second challenge is data collection. And with the data collection, we faced, I could identify 4 main things that I can discuss and describe in details, but I can also, because of the time, I will be short and will allow more in my description, but I will allow more discussion during the questions session. Movement restriction, as Amir was asking, and I will give you more detailed description about it. Trust, uncertainty, and identity. 4 main themes that I would like to explain. Movement restriction. We have 2 movement restrictions. The first one is within the occupied Palestinian territory. I still believe it's under occupation. And movement restriction, we're talking about movement between Jerusalem and the West Bank. For me, it was between Jerusalem and Birzeit. Within the West Bank, so if I want to move between Ramallah and Hebron, and from north to south, within occupied Palestinian territory, between West Bank and Gaza. So for us, it's very difficult to have the 3 movements. For me, I think, privileged because I have the Israeli residence, so I can move between Jerusalem and the West Bank. But the Palestinians with Palestinian ID, they cannot move between Jerusalem and West Bank unless they have Israeli permit. I cannot go to Gaza. unless I get Israeli permit. So Palestinians cannot move within Palestinian areas, simply. What are the consequences of these on my research? First, transportation cost. Whenever you talk with any donor, the minimal cost will be on transportation. For us, the bulk of the budget will go for transportation, because a way that will take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 15 minutes, it take 1 hour. One trip between 2 villages, it might take 3 transportations. So you have to move to this place, take another taxi or car, and then take another transportation. So the cost is very expensive. Time. The movement between one place to another takes lots of time. So if you budget for a research that will take a month in normal setting, for us, it will take 3 months. Because we have to move, it will cost us a lot. Field work costs us a lot. Sometimes there is delay, and sometimes there are forced stop for certain areas and for research. If an area is closed and we cannot access that area, then we have to wait until it's open, or we have to decide to close this place and move to another one. And sometimes we have to stop the whole research. It depends on the situation. We need to carry our ID with us all the time. And thank you, Elizabeth, for mentioning this, but our ID it's a must. You cannot move without your ID. We need to have security clearance to enter certain areas. Certain areas, even if it's Palestinian, we need to have a permission from Israelis to enter this. So movement within is very restrictive. It has lots of consequences on the research, on planning the research, and the timing of the research, and the cost of the research. And the whole thing is not normal, and it doesn't, you wouldn't hear about it in any other setting. Movement restriction also to other countries. So, and given the classification I have given to you, the Jerusalemites, people living in Jerusalem, people living in the West Bank, and people living in Gaza, each have their own restriction in moving outside the occupied Palestinian territory. This has a consequences on the cost, on the time, visa issue, less chance to participate in international conferences, and less possibility to be part of a regional or international research team. It's not easy to say, okay, come on, let's work together, me and Dr. Farahat in Pakistan. I'm not sure if I can come to Pakistan. Oh, no, maybe I can come to Pakistan, but I'm not sure if I will be able to go back to Jerusalem because I will have the Pakistani stamp on my passport. So such simple collaboration, we need to think, plan, and think of different alternatives for us to see how we can do it, whether we can do it or not. How can we go around it to build this relationship? And I will give a very small example about movement outside the country. One of the things that we are doing at our institute is the Lancet Palestinian Health Alliance Conference, which is an annual conference. We're getting the support of the Lancet to do this. Let's say the moral support of the Lancet. We're doing the whole thing. We're trying to support researchers, and we're trying to provide the platform for Palestinians to talk about Palestinian health. We could not have the conference in Palestine having all Palestinians I have listed in the previous slide to attend in Ramallah. Palestinians from Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria, they couldn't come. When we held this conference in Jordan, we managed to bring Palestinians from Lebanon, Jordan, Palestinian from Lebanon and Jordan and West Bank to attend in Jordan, but Palestinian from Gaza, they couldn't because they have to go through different permissions and get different approvals. When we did it in Lebanon, because let's think it might be Lebanon the right platform. We could have people coming from different places, but people who were Palestinian coming from France could not enter Lebanon because of their ID. So as Palestinian, the whole group couldn't come together in one scientific platform to discuss health of Palestinians, as simple as it is. Trust. Given the situation I have described, and lots of stories you hear about Palestinians selling their lands, Palestinians selling their houses. You don't know how people were tricked or what happened that made people sign on certain papers. And we're talking about the early century when not everybody was educated. So people were either signing on papers, stamped papers, and because they have trust. But now when you go as a researcher and ask people, we're doing this research, would you like to sign on this consent? No way, we're not going to sign, nothing. And this is the main challenge for us, obtaining written consent from people. People don't trust signing anything. This is a main challenge for us when we apply for a proposal. When we say oral consent, no, you should follow international regulation, it should be written consent, etc., etc. We don't sign. We lost our land, we lost our houses because we signed. People are linking these things together. When you come as a researcher and ask a very simple thing as, would you like to sign this consent? So community trust is very important. This is the first thing, but also security. We have lots of political issue related to people coming and saying, hello, we're coming here to ask about this study. And then it turned out that they are security asking about prisoners or related to something. So security is affecting our research a lot. Community trust is a key issue. It was a main challenge in my life. I think this will apply for other conflict settings. When researchers plan their research, the first thing they have to do is to obtain and get community trust if they want their research to be successful. The second issue that is related to trust is the stakeholders. And me working with mainly with the health providers, getting the trust of the different stakeholders was also a challenge. The way people are trained, the way the Palestinian community was treated by different agencies, make them believe that we should trust internationals rather than locals. So gaining the trust of stakeholders as a local researcher was a big challenge for us. Now it's not a problem, but I'm just describing the whole challenge throughout my career life. Uncertainty. And this term, I think my colleague is working on this to define uncertainty and try to measure the uncertainty in our life from a qualitative point of way. But for me, uncertainty in research, it has affected a lot our research. So suddenly you will have closure. You planned your research, you started your data collection, and then you have the closure. I think that the best example is what happened with the COVID-19 when people were living their normal life and suddenly everything stopped, everything closed. So how can you manage? How can you adapt with this? So for us, closure, strikes, something happened, and then the whole community decided to go on strike. So everything is closed, everything is blocked. We cannot move, we cannot do our research. Sometimes there is invasion, actually political invasion. The army will come to a certain city, or they will come to university, and it happened. They came to our campus like several times. They came into the campus, opened the buildings, they arrested students. Students are angry, we have strike, close the university, everything will stop. But we have adapted to this. It was a big challenge, or still it is a challenge in our life, but we managed also to overcome this thing. Field workers, you have field workers working and suddenly they were arrested. This invasion, you lost your field worker. You spent like 3 weeks training this field worker and suddenly you lost your field workers. Scarcity of raw materials. And this is a very simple thing. Maybe you don't even think about it, but if you're doing a research and you want to do culture for certain microorganism, you don't have the raw material because importing this material has to go through Israel. And if certain material within this material is not allowed to come in, then you're not allowed to do your research and everything will stop. I'm talking about research, but this happens also in terms of medication. For example, we don't have radiology because the material is not allowed to go into the West Bank. It might be used in other things. And this applies to other materials that is not allowed to go into Palestinian areas. So uncertainty is a term, I'm not sure if it's the right term to put it, but you have to live with plan A, B, C, and D sometimes to make sure that you're completing your research. We don't write any proposal with, I think we are very good in writing challenges for your research. Maybe you can write the objective and challenges will take the bulk of our research, because if this happens, we'll do this. If this happens, we'll do that. If this happens, we'll take this and then we'll do this. But if this and this happen, then we will do this and this and this. And when we have our Gantt chart, it will be like gray and then dark gray and then black. Just in case if this doesn't happen, then we might have to extend to this and then we might have to extend to that. The uncertainty, we lived with this. It was a main challenge for us, but we managed to live with it. Identity. I think identity is, I'm not sure it fits here, but it's an overarching for the whole thing. For me personally, being a person who was born in Jerusalem, so I was born in Jerusalem. I have an ID that says I am an Israeli resident. In my travel document, I have an Israeli travel document that says I am Jordanian. And I have a Jordanian travel document that doesn't have any nationality. So whenever I apply to any visa, I have to take the two travel documents, and then I have to go in person to explain the situation, saying I am Palestinian. I was born in Jerusalem. I don't have any documents that says Palestinian. I'm not Jordanian. I'm not Israeli, but this is what I have. And then you have to decide, because in certain European areas, you don't have to apply for visa because you have Israeli ID. If you're Jordanian, you have to apply for certain visa. I'm not Jordanian, I'm not Israeli. So what should I do? And people, I've been in several interviews and people will be looking at me and like, what should we do? Maybe we should give you a visa just in case the people will not stop you at the airport because they wouldn't understand your situation. And I was like, okay, let's go for the process and let's have a visa. We don't want to have a problem in the airport. You understood my situation here in the embassy, but I don't know what will happen in the airport. So this issue of being lost somewhere, I know I'm Palestinian. This is fact. I don't have any paper that says I'm Palestinian. This is very dramatic. Being Palestinian, living in Jerusalem, this has affected my life. I will give you a small example. If I live there, then I have to pay tax. I have to fill all, to do all my paperwork in Hebrew. I have to complete all my work for the social security. I have to do everything as if I am an Israeli citizen. I will give you the story of my PhD, and hopefully I'm not taking long. I have only 2 slides. When I finished my PhD, graduated with my PhD, I have to go to the Israeli Ministry of Education to get my degree accredited. When I submitted them, they said, okay, you have all the papers. And over 2 years, they were asking for certain papers from me, and I was sending to my university, trying to provide all the documents. And at the end, I received a letter from the University of Glasgow saying, if the Israeli Ministry of Education needs any paper, please ask them to contact us directly. Because I think they felt offended with the way of communication, send us this and send us that. I don't know what happened then, because the communications between the two institutions. But after 3 years, the Ministry of Education decided to give me a viva or defense of my PhD thesis. Okay, I have to live with it. I need to get my PhD accredited. So I accepted. And I went to do this viva. But the first thing I said, I finished my PhD 3 years ago. So I don't remember the details of my PhD, the specific lines. I've read it last night, but I can give you a general discussion, but I cannot discuss the details as if I'm going to defend my thesis. And I have another question. If I failed, are you going to write to my university to withdraw my certificate? So why are you doing this? It was so humiliating, I have to say. But I have to go through the whole process. And after 4 years, I got my certificate accredited. Just to have an idea about how Palestinian citizens are treated. And the last thing with the identity, I decided to work in Palestinian universities. I can work in an Israeli university. I work in Palestinian university. The income of Palestinian university, my salary is very low compared to the salary in Israeli universities. I still live in Israel, so I have to pay the taxes of Israel. I have to buy stuff from Israel. So I live the living expenses of Israel. I take the salary of the Palestinian Authority, just to have an idea about the cost of the decision you have to make. And the last point that I would like to say, and if we have any editor or associated editor in the audience, please pay attention to this. Publication. One of the main challenges that we faced is terminology. So whenever I write about any paper, say I'm talking about childbirth for decision where women would like to take to give birth. And in the title, we have occupied Palestinian territory, a case of occupied Palestinian territory. The first revision was, why you are using occupied Palestinian territory, not Palestinian Authority? Is it my choice, or is it the reviewer or editor choice to decide which terminology I use? And in some case, when we were writing some slightly political, it's not political paper, we were talking about quality of life after Gaza invasion. And when we submitted this paper, the editor said, we would like to ask for a correspondence from an Israeli side. I was like, are we sitting in a debate where it's a scientific paper? We discussed, we have a scientific tool, standardized tool. We followed the whole research methodology, and these are the findings. Why do you want to have an Israeli corresponding to our paper? So it's become more political rather than scientific, even in a scientific environment. You receive lots of publication, lots of responses from journals saying, we're not interested in highlighting certain political issues. Or this is scientific paper. If you look at it, this is scientific paper. It comes from a conflict setting, but it has all the scientific component. It's a main challenge, it's a major challenge. I have to say it's one of the largest, biggest, huge challenge that we have faced. With academic boycott, I think there's more awareness about the whole thing, but you don't know who's dominating the different journals that we are publishing in. So there are some politics behind what's happening in the world, and we were faced by this. I will stop here and say, given all these challenges, I managed to come as a top researchers in the world. So we will be able, myself and lots of female researchers from Palestine and from the developing world and from conflict setting, we will be successful and we will continue to be successful. But these are the main challenges that I have faced in my life. And hopefully it's not a political presentation. I think it's an experience, but you can get the sense of how people believe in their own identity, let me say it. I will finish my slide with this figure. It's one of the most famous ones that represent the Palestinian case, showing how the Palestinian people are carrying their case and they're getting old with it, but they're not, they're still holding on. We're surviving and we're holding on. And I'll stop here, and if you have any question, I'm happy to respond to your questions.
Niveen, thank you
Yes.
very much for this very, very powerful and actually heart-wrenching narrative of your life, which also exemplifies the struggle that you have made to achieve your level of excellence. And you've been lucky also in having some opportunities, but your challenges make our own challenges, at what we call challenges, pale into insignificance, like the ethical review committee is taking too long, or the funding is not coming through, and things of that nature. We don't face any kind of challenges that you're talking about, and going through all of that and still achieving what you have achieved is actually, it is remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable. We have a number of questions, and my associate Swaliha has been sifting through them, and she'll put them to you one by one so that you can respond. So over to Swaliha.
Yeah. All right. So one of the first questions that I'm going to ask is by Dr. Mariam Hassan. You spoke about brain drain challenge. So how do you and which is an issue which is very much similar to in Pakistan as well. So how do you deal with this issue in your region?
Well, I have to say we're still suffering from this challenge. What we usually do is we focus on young researchers. I feel happy if people migrate somewhere in the region. I will feel a little bit sad if they will go outside to the Western world. If they are still in our region, I will be happy because we have good people are still around. What we usually do is we focus on young researchers. It's a continuous process. We identify good researchers, good research assistants, and we invest in these people. We send lots of people to do PhD abroad. We don't have PhD programs. Recently, we start to have PhD programs in Palestine, but we have strong networks and collaboration with different universities in the world. We try to send as much people to do their degrees, and we depend on their moral. We cannot connect them and say, you should come back. We try to have this moral agreement that at least try to come back and help us. If you don't come back, try to help us by building a network that supports us to help in capacity building other people. So it's a continuous process and we have to live with it.
Okay, I hope that answers your question, Dr. Mariam. A question that I had while I was going through your presentation was, so I mean, I understand from your bio that you do a lot of implementation research, which obviously has this idea that it will necessarily translate into some practice within the healthcare context, right? So how do delays in your implementation research translate into the clinical or public health context? Because you do a lot of work in the reproductive health area. So, I mean, would you be able to provide an example? Because there are delays in your research.
Yes. As I've said, I'm trying to do this, and I will use this platform actually to announce that we are working on establishing a regional chapter. My colleague Saima from Pakistan started the regional chapter and implementation research. So who would like to join from Pakistan, they can join Saima. But also you can contact me and we can work together on this. The good thing is, I mentioned that one of the challenges is gaining trust with the stakeholders. It took us lots of time to build this trust, and now we have a good relationship. I think young researchers will face this challenge now. Working with different stakeholders, mainly Ministry of Health and UNRWA, the UN agency responsible for Palestinian refugees, helped us in working together and start in working on certain programs. And one, we have successful idea, it's still in process, but it's working, like working on cesarean section, different hospitals working on the cesarean section, and we don't know how to reduce it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that we decided to do is to introduce small intervention, which is the Robson classification. With the Robson classification, it's a way of classifying women who are giving birth into one of 10 categories. So women should fit somewhere in one of these categories. It's a nice way of removing the blame from doctors saying you are taking the wrong decision, etc., into discussing how as a team we manage these women and why these women fit in this category rather than this category. So it's an introduction of an internal audit program that will allow the whole team to discuss between them why we decided to have this cesarean section rather than this. And naturally, with a good discussion, the cesarean section will go down, but also the whole management of the birth process should improve, because it will classify women into different categories. And between them, it's not like you took the one decision because I am the head of the department, took this decision. So it's a more scientific way of discussing within the team why we manage each woman in this way. And this is one of the examples we have done.
All right. So Dr. Moazzam also has a question, and so I'm just going to read that out. Is there understanding on part of some Israeli academics who understand the pressures you face, including funding to do research? Are there any who have made an attempt to reach out to you as a research colleague, transcending the political issues? And is there any hope in this area?
Let me answer the question in this way. I will not answer the different sections. I will answer from my point of view. Israeli academics, some of them, they are very nice people. I've met them in several international conferences. They work because they work. And maybe I need to highlight something. I classified Palestinian people, but I didn't classify Israeli people. There are certain people in Israel who would like to work, succeed in their life, and publish, and that's it. So they don't care about what's happening in the world. They don't care about the politics of the whole thing, which sounds good. But for me, it doesn't really sound good, because the world you are living in, it is sustained because of certain action taken against people. So although you're not participating directly in what's happening to these people, you're not taking an action to advocate or to say anything. There is a movement like the Beit Salem institution and other people who are working in support of Palestinians. They don't ask for direct collaboration in academia because they do understand the type of boycott. But just think about it. If you are living in a peaceful environment and you are living normally as if you are living in the States or you're living in Europe, there is no problems. But to reach this stage, this life, there are certain consequences on other people. So I'm not saying they are politically against Palestinian, but they don't have any opinion, which is also not good. So this is my point in terms of relationship. The academic boycott, we believe in academic boycott because it actually affects them. And the idea of academic boycott started when lots of research was done on Palestinian by Israeli academics. So that it started, we don't know if it's continued or but it's this type of research which is not acceptable. And the second group of people who are completely not related to politics, but they should have an opinion. Because you're living in an environment because certain action are taken against other people. So I think I will stop here in this respect.
All right. So a follow-up question from Ms. Anita. So what kind of opportunities do young Palestinians have for higher education and entering any professions?
Oh. First, I will start with the dark side. We have high education rate among Palestinians, very high. We have very low literacy rate, very high education rate. Most people, they finish their high school. We have very good education of a bachelor degree. We have good proportion of people with a master's degree. This is positive from international perspective, but this is dark side from my perspective, because we don't have work opportunity, and you don't have work opportunity, then it's a waste resources, and these people will leave the country. What we try to do in my specialization in public health is we try to get more variation of expertise and specialty so we can keep people in the country. If we repeat specialty, people will leave. They will not find job, or it will be very competitive. It will be very difficult for them. So what we do with young researchers, we try to provide, to look for scholarships that is abroad for master degree and for PhD degree with a very different specialty that is needed for the country, but we don't have it here. This will make the young researcher very motivated and will keep them here, or at least will make sure that they will come back again. But it's good. I should be proud that we have good education rate, high education rate, very low illiteracy rate. Good, but we need the government, the Palestinian authorities should work hard to invest in these people.
Okay, one more question. We have a couple more, but I think you mentioned about field workers getting arrested as one of your challenges. So Dr. Elizabeth Bukusi is asking, so what are the reasons for the field workers getting arrested for? Is it because of lack of papers, and who eventually takes responsibility for getting, for these field workers?
I will give more detailed information about field workers so I can explain why some field workers get arrested. Because of the movement restriction that we have, usually we try to have field workers from certain areas rather than have one team that will work across the country. We try to have smaller teams that work in certain areas. Now, in certain areas, some people, sometimes we are forced to have people from external areas. And this is when the identity or ID or permission is needed. So if by instance, people, they don't have the correct ID or expired permission, or they entered an area that is not allowed by people, they will be arrested. So it's more related to area, movement, and permissions rather than having any political issue.
I hope that answers your question, Dr. Bukusi. She also has another question, which is, I think, which can be answered briefly, I guess. So you mentioned about the problems of getting funding which really, because you people have oral or verbal consent. So do local ethical committees allow verbal consent for research participation?
Yes, we have to do lots of work with our ethical committee to convince them to have different options. And in conflict setting, and I think Dr. Amer can elaborate more on this, but in conflict settings, and I think this applies to other places, getting a written consent is very challenging. People are happy to talk, but people are concerned and worried when they sign. So if you have two witnesses to witness that the person has consented, they have given an oral consent, that's fine. And usually when we do field work, we don't allow one person for security reason. We usually have two field workers going into the field just to make sure that that person is protected, the field worker. So if we have long discussion with the ethical committees, they allow now us in certain areas to obtain oral consent rather than written consent. But oral consent, it will be with the witness, et cetera, et cetera. So to make sure that we obtain that consent, it's not just the researchers decided that we have obtained this consent. And the researchers has to sign rather than the participants. Long way, they accepted. The challenge was sometimes in publication. So when we publish, we say oral consent, the reviewers, you will have to go through this debate with the reviewers and the editor to convince them that this is the context setting situation and this is how we managed to do it. So it's not only in fundraising and in field work, but also when it comes to publication, the consent is an issue and the way we address it is also very challenging. But we managed to go with it. and the oral consent became more acceptable. But in certain settings that it's stable and you can obtain a written consent, it's fine. So for example, when we have a research with women, the consent was from the kin, so the relative. So the relatives were fine, but we were asking the women, and the kin would, for example, the husband will sign. So that was okay. Also, this is cultural thing when it comes to take who will sign and whose mobile number to take, etc. So we need to have to take all these into consideration. And the ethical committees, we have debated with them, but I think we are on the same line now.
All right, I think that's, Dr. Mosam has another question. So you made a couple of points about publications, problems that you faced, especially from, that you get from an Israeli point of view. So have you faced these problems with international submissions as well? When you
yes, actually, this was actually an international submission. International journal, like, I don't want to mention journals, but international journals, European journals. I think they want, these journals wanted.
Yeah, sorry, to follow up on that. So is the, which I find this mind-boggling, and that's why I'm asking you. So have you had the occasion to actually question them on this? Because it makes no sense scientifically.
Well, to give the credit, it's not me, the one who started this argument. My colleague Rita Jackaman, she's very spokative, and maybe you can search her. She's a very well-established public health professor here. We can say that she's the founder of public health in Palestine. She's the one who was writing back. For me, at the beginning, I used to feel disappointed. Okay, I will change the journal, and khalas, I'm not going through this. But she was the one who either she will write or she will encourage me to write back and say, okay, let's do this and let's argue back. So at the beginning, maybe she was well established. She has the courage to encourage us to move forward. But now I think I have the courage to do the same. So it doesn't have any scientific ground. I think the journal want to be protected. And I will give you an example of how academia is not fair. It's not fair. It's not how academia is played with politics. In 2014, after Gaza invasion, the Lancet published a letter describing the situation in Gaza. It was written by internationals. And a huge attack was on the editor of the Lancet on how you write such things, etc., 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 etc. It was, I think it reached a stage that his position was even threatened by his institution. So it's very, very politically related, but people don't talk about it.
Well, I don't think you lack courage, Dr. Niveen. So I think you're doing the right thing if you're also questioning them. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you very much.
May I just make an interjection right now? I think and it's been documented, which is why I'm pointing it out, but the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics kind of faces a similar issue, published something about Kashmir, and they were attacked for publishing something which is not medical or which is not related to medical ethics. So they really had to take their position. So I think this problem of occupied territory, etc., kind of is it's present in different places, and I think there is a definite bias. But I agree, and I'm just going. It's just a comment, but I do agree with your point that when certain people, academics from Israel, would not take a position, I think if you operate from a stance of neutrality, that's also a problem in itself, because you're making a declaration at that point in time as well that I choose to stay away from political, but you really cannot stay apolitical in this world. And that's just a comment.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. A follow-up question would be from Tahira Abdullah, and then it's disconnected to research, but really it's I think it's a very important question to ask. So after the sad loss of exceptionally brave, rare Israeli peace activists and journalists like Robert Fisk, is there a second tier of younger human rights or peace activists, journalists, academics writing on all this justice and humiliation in occupied Palestine from Israel or outside? I mean, would you be aware of such people?
Just to give the credit to, there are lots of activists, lots of peace activists. Some are present here, some will try to be here present in the occupied Palestinian territory, but some are very strong and writing from their country. Lots of people and lots of I would say Jewish people from outside are also supporting, because it's affecting the mix between Israeli occupation and Jewish is a little bit disturbing for them, because some people will just say Jewish people, while what's happening is Israeli people who are doing this. So this distinction between the two things is very important, and we have lots of Jewish activists who are supporting the Palestinian case because they are not accepting and they're taking side, not being neutral, saying that what's happening is not correct. So the distinction between politics and religion is very important. And I will just repeat the sentence I have said at the beginning of my presentation. Jewish people was here in Palestine long time ago, before even nobody can remember when, but they were minority, very few. And we were living together peacefully. And we have lots of Christian people, I think Palestine has the greatest variation of people from this ethnic background. We have lots of people from Armenia, from Pakistan, from Morocco. We have different places that are named after these people. So as people, regardless of religion, religion is not an issue, just to highlight. It's politics that is playing a role here. And lots of people, lots of activists from the world, regardless of their religion, they are working with Palestinian. And I don't have a name in my head just to mention. Lots of people are working and supporting Palestinian, which means that the Palestinian case is still alive. And this is reassuring and very good for us. So I'll stop here.
Okay. Thank you. One more question from Dr. Mariam. So research under normal circumstances can actually be frustrating, and you have added challenges. So what qualities do the Palestinian researchers like yourself have to develop to stay focused and optimistic? And a follow-up question and a connected question by Dr. Saima was, and how do you stay resilient under such circumstances?
Well, asking how you define resilience, I have to copy my colleague Rita, because she's our social scientist, and she can give you this nice scientific definition of resilience. My simple definition of resilience is we are here, and we are alive, and we try to live normal life in the different abnormal conditions. And we are here and we're carrying our case. So, and we're surviving, we are competing with international academia. We are writing our papers, we are presenting in international conferences. We are here. This is the simple definition of resilience. How people try to be focused, you need to have a goal in your life. If you have a goal, then you will go towards your goal. I think all Palestinians, their goal is liberation. So it might be a dream, it might be, I don't know how I call it. For us, liberation and to feel free. So if you want to reach this freedom, you need to work hard. And a very simple example of freedom, it might sound very strange, but I'm not sure if you heard in the news that 6 Palestinians last week managed to obtain their own liberation from the Israeli prison. In the media, it will say 6 Palestinians escape. For us, 6 Palestinians regained their freedom. So this is how we live.
It's
Niveen, that's such a
Yes.
such a apt characterization of these 6 Palestinians and their struggle to regain their freedom in very trying circumstances. The way that you've described your lives and the lives of other researchers is, I mean, it completely our issues that we call issues pale into complete insignificance. And also, as a reviewer myself, I'm questioning my own self as to when I apply these same standards of ethical scrutiny to a project coming out of Palestine, for instance, and looking at informed consent and saying that this is inadequate in my standards or in the world of global standards, etc., without knowing the real context in which Palestinian researchers are operating and doing research, we apply the same standards. And I now question my own self and my own ability to review research coming out of Palestine. I've done that, and I'm not sure whether I've done the right thing when I've questioned many of the obvious questions that arose, because the situation that you showed us, even the map, when you started off with the map, we are familiar with the Palestinian map and the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, etc. But when you focused into it, it's not what appears on the map that the world sees. It's a very different. Even that map is unjust. But when you zoom in into the microcosm of your reality, the reality really strikes you. The barriers, the obstacles in daily life. Research seems to be a superfluous thing when you can't even get to a doctor, or get to your school, or get to buy milk without being persecuted and being threatened with arrest. So your reality is maybe real for you, but it is so unreal for the rest of the world. There has to be an effort by the scientific community and others who sympathize with the Palestinian cause to highlight these issues and the challenges, and to set different parameters, I think, to assess and to help. Like, for instance, your very practical issue of inability to come to Pakistan. We will welcome you to open arms. We want you to teach out there in our room to us, and there would be nothing better than a teacher like you. However, when you get back, you'll get into trouble because your passport will be stamped with an entry stamp in Pakistan. So can we think there must be a way of thinking outside of the box to enable our partners and our friends in Palestine to be able to actually at least move around and join us in the various international fora. And I've seen you struggle in your own way of traveling, etc., even to cross the Hussein Bridge into Jordan. So all of these challenges are very real for you, but they're unknown. They're completely unknown to the rest of the world. The reality that comes out is a very tainted reality. It's not the real reality, I think. So thank you very much for this session. There are many more questions that keep on arising in our minds, but I think we are reaching the limits of our time. I think it was, as I said before, it was heart-wrenching to have you join us, but it was also an eye-opener for me as well as for everybody else over here, I think, I mean, I'd like to thank you for giving us this opportunity to come face to face with your reality, and to be able to get to understand what real challenges are and what real problems are. We have no problems at all as far as our lives are concerned. So again, thank you very much, Dr. Moazzam, our chair of the Center of Biomedical Ethics and Culture. I think I would like her to say the final words before we close.
So it's just, Dr. Aamir, I'll make 2 comments with your permission, Dr. Niveen. Dr. Aamir, I think you made a very good point about the issue of when you review research proposals and papers coming from our part of the world, because we must not forget that the international guidelines for research, we call them international. However, we know the source of that, and that comes from a particular way a particular culture, etc. So I think that's a good point that you made to keep in mind. Dr. Niveen, just to add to Dr. Amer's thanks to you, and I think that's from everybody who is sitting around the table right now. I'll just end by saying something that I started with, which was on narratives. So essentially your presentation today, and because of my interest in the social aspects of both research and healthcare, I think your presentation was very effective. It was a narrative presentation. You said you don't do that. Well, I think you should, because that's what makes it alive to people who are listening to you. It's your narrative. So thank you very much for an out-of-the-box seminar that you've done for CBEC today. Thank you very much, and you're a brave woman. And I think we need more of those around the world, not just in Palestine. So thank you.
I would like to say thank you very much. And I think your seminar is a way to disseminate my experience. And what you've done is already was answering your question, how we can help with this seminar. I hope the audience enjoyed this, but I'm happy that people are interested in knowing how we live. So I wish I have managed to communicate it correctly and in a good way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Naveen, for this opportunity. Khuda Hafiz. Assalamu alaikum.
Just a second. Just a second. We're going to join,
announcement.
An announcement. Fareed, can you please share it? Yeah.
So this is, go ahead, Smaria.
No, you can go ahead.
So this is a event that we are holding in October. This is a Ethics During Public Health Emergencies workshop. It's going to be a hybrid workshop, open for people who can come physically, for limited numbers in Karachi, and also online. People who are interested in this 3-day hybrid workshop can email us on our email address, which is cbec.siut@gmail.com, and or just inbox us in our Facebook or tweet, and we'll be able to consider your application. So this is inshallah happening on October 22nd to 20th to 22nd, a 3-day hybrid workshop on ethical challenges pertaining to research and public health. So with that, thank you very much everyone for attending the workshop, for attending the CBEC on the web webinar with Dr. Niveen. And inshallah, we will meet everyone with the next event soon. Assalamu alaikum.